Namaste, welcome to Satsang. So, Satsang is, in the highest and most direct definition of the word, association with the truth. And to associate with the truth is a meeting really on the deepest level inside our own self, a meeting of our own permanent nature. We are well acquainted, excuse me, we are well acquainted with our temporary nature, with our changing becomingness, with our someoneness, with our body, our mind, our desires, our goals, dreams, our emotions, our experiences, our relationships, everything that is moving and changing about us, we have got to know very, very well. So satsang is really to get to know that part of ourself that is not changing, that is permanent, and to really recognize that that permanent, unchanging aspect of us is what we are looking from, that we are not, as we have believed in the past, a being inside a body, looking through a body, or perhaps we may believe at a certain stage that we are this body. And to come to see through satsang, through direct association with truth, that we are looking from the deeper space of our being, and that the body is an optional extra that we don't need, but that we value, that we enjoy, and that we respect. And it gives us a temporary sense of being someone, a temporary sense of also having one particular perspective, how it looks from one corner of time and space, and the sense of being a being that is moving through time and space. So satsang is going to help us by coming to recognize that aspect of us that's permanent, because until we have deeply recognized that permanent nature of our being, then we're going to still have some residual feeling that when this body has gone, that we'll be gone. And that is the basis of all of our fear, all of our suffering. And really the basis of our sense of feeling less than whole. So we're going to do some self-inquiry this evening. We're going to dive into an actual experience of finding what we are. And if you feel a pull to or drawn to go along with me in this inquiry, and I really urge you to follow along. And no matter how many times we've seen what we really are in our permanent aspect, it always pays to see it again, helps us to see it again and again. The more that we get to know our unchanging aspect, the more stability we're going to begin to experience, no matter what is changing in our manifest, moving becomingness of our body-mind. So it pays us really well to, it serves us well to get to know what we are beyond the mind and body, and to recognize that that is something that we can come to recognize and get to know. As we do that, it's going to become clearer and clearer that that really is fundamentally what we are, that there is an aspect of us that is unchanging and not limited in any way, that is the essence of our being, the same one essence that is everywhere, that is formless and is not in a state of becoming. It's not trying to reach anywhere. It already comes with a sense of completion, a sense of being adequate, a sense of peace, a sense of worthiness, and a total inability to suffer. So as we're going through this inquiry, then just do your best to follow along. And with self-inquiry, there's no perfect way to do it. There is only the way that we do it right now in this session. And it's not the goal, I just want to say this before we begin, to have a particular experience in self-inquiry, although that may happen, to have a recognition. It's enough to begin to want to see, and our inquiry is literally an openness to find out that the other aspect of ourselves that we haven't perhaps yet explored. So we're not needing anything to happen out of this inquiry. We're just open to see, and that's the best place we can come to it from. And if I'm taking us through it and I'm saying something that you're not fully understanding or can't experientially recognize as yet, it is totally okay. It's enough to want to know, to see. And that is going to happen as we allow these questions that we're going to ask ourselves tonight to sink in deeper. So let's start with what we already know about ourselves. We know that we have a body. We know that that body has a mind, thoughts are going on inside our brain, coming and going. We know that we also feel emotions coming and going. We have relationships, we have goals, dreams, desires, have experiences going on. And we have sense perception. You know, you can hear these words, you can see this image effortlessly through your senses. All of that we know about ourselves, but all of that is also temporary and is not going to be here forever. So when we then ask, what else can we find about ourselves? What else am I? Is there anything more to discover about myself than that aspect of me that's moving and changing? And when I first asked myself this question, what really am I actually, beyond the mind and body, independent of the mind and body, there was this big blank in my awareness, this kind of non-answer, a kind of, I don't know actually, I really don't know what I am. I didn't find any infinite awareness in that way that perhaps I'd read about and heard about. What I did find, and you can check this out right now, is something different to the mind and body. What am I actually? If I say, this is my mind, my body, my emotions, my thoughts, my experiences, they're all indicative that they belong to me, but they are not fundamental to me. So what is this me, this I, that says my mind? What are you when we don't reference the body, when we don't reference thoughts and emotions, just temporarily? We know that aspect of ourselves very well. And you may find that you just have no answer at all. There's a seeming non-answer, or there might be just some blank space, or just some sense that there isn't a thing that is you. There's something here which isn't a thing. We can also access this by recognizing if the body and mind weren't here anymore, there would still be this spaciousness, this space in which the body is now appearing. The space in which the body is appearing will still be here when the body is absent. We can access it that way too. Whichever way we find a way in to the self, we find that it's not a thing, it's not an object, it's not something that we can grasp with our hands. Again, just check this out. What really am I when I don't reference my body, my mind? And it may be strange and different to what we're used to. It may be a different way to experience ourselves. We're very used to experiencing the moving, changing part of us, our body, our mind, and all of that. Let's just check out, what can you find when you ask the question, what really am I? Or what is my permanent nature? What is it that always remains about me? And what is this I really? And we find some kind of no-thingness, some kind of insubstantial formlessness, that which is not a form, which forms appear in spaciousness. And it may seem completely irrelevant, it may seem dull, it may seem boring. It certainly did for me. It may seem a shock as well, that this is what we find, that we find not a thing, we don't find an object, that we can't find a separate entity called me. We may have believed our entire existence, as I did, that I am me. I'm as big as this body. I'm as wide as this body. Maybe I extend a little bit further out than the body. When I really actually looked for that, I couldn't find any separate being that I could point to and say, this is me. What we find instead is kind of the background spaciousness in which the body has been appearing is appearing. And maybe we've had it flipped on its head, that this spaciousness, this background of our experience is the least important. Perhaps we've thought it's the least important part of us, when in reality it is perhaps the most important part of us, because it's not going to disappear. You can check this out right now. Does this formless no-thingness, this blank empty space of being, does it need the body to be here? Is it dependent upon our thoughts, our body, and our emotions? Is it coming and going in the same way that our body comes, lasts for a while, and then goes? Is it appearing and disappearing? Let's just check that out now. What can you know about yourself? Are you coming and going? You know that your thoughts are coming and going. You can watch them appear and disappear. You can watch your body change subtly over the years. You can watch your emotions change. You can watch your experience change. But are you changing? Are you something that's changing? Just checking these questions out with me, just looking, doing the best you can to check them out. Again, just want to say, it doesn't particularly matter to me about a specific answer. The question is more important when we're asking the question, wanting to challenge these assumptions that we've had about ourselves. We see the qualities of the body-mind, that it comes and it goes and it changes and it evolves, and we take those to be our qualities. But is that really so when we look? Can we find anything that is changing and moving in that empty formlessness? Just checking that out. Is there anything that it needs? Is there anything you need? If this is you, is there anything really that you want here? Your mind may have several desires, even a desire to recognize the truth of your being. But does the actual truth of your being need anything at all? How far does it reach in all directions? If my beingness is not a thing, if it's not something I can pick up and move over here, can I say that my beingness is here or over there? Does it fit into those categories like a thing, like an object? If I pick up this glass on the table, I can move it over there. I can say it's there or here. but that's not a thing, the spaciousness of my being. Can you say where it is and where it isn't? How far does it reach? Can you really find a boundary or an edge to your being when you look? We've all assumed that there is one, where I stop and you start, where me becomes you, where me becomes other than me. Can you really find that when you look? Where do you stop? Can a thing stop that doesn't have any form or shape? Can a insubstantial nothingness really have any boundaries anyway? And again, just being willing to look at these questions with me and to think about yourself and investigate yourself in unfamiliar ways is going to pay such huge rewards. Begin to undo assumptions that we've had about ourselves that are causing so much suffering. This formless you, this nothingness, is it aging? Is it growing old? Is it going to come to an end? Is there a point where it began? Can it begin if it doesn't appear and disappear? Things, objects appear, are born, have a starting point, and then die or cease to exist. But can that happen to something that isn't a thing? Can this emptiness of being appear and disappear? Does it fit into those categories, or is it something entirely different to that? Is it dependent on time? Was there a time when it wasn't here? Has it just simply come into existence, this emptiness, because our attention is now upon it? Does it disappear when our attention goes back to thoughts at some point? What happens to it when our attention goes back to our sense of being someone, our mind, our body? Is it changed at all? Is it disappearing and appearing? And if you'll indulge me a little further, I'd like to just take this a little further. Again, just checking out, what really am I when I'm not counting my body and my mind? Anything that's temporary, and we're not discounting those as wrong, the body, mind, and the thoughts. We're just looking for the permanent aspect of our being. Is it then this nothingness? Are you looking from it, or are you looking at it? And again, just trying to, where am I looking at it from? If it's formless and all around my body and doesn't have any edges, where am I looking at it from? How am I recognizing it? Is there even a me and it when I check that out? Can I find a someone floating around in this emptiness of being? It feels like there's someone, there seems to be a someone, but can I really check it out? Can I find when I look? Or is there just my body, my thoughts, and this spacious nothingness that is me? So just looking like this again and again, getting to know that aspect of you that isn't dependent upon anything, that is here before our body arrives, before the first thought appears, and is here right now, and will be here after the body's gone. Just checking that out again, experiencing it Again, we're not thinking about it so much in self-inquiry, we're actually directly inquiring. What can I know about myself, this formless self? We can conclude that it's not at all a thing. It's not something I can see with my eyes or pick up with my hands. It's also not a subtle thing like a thought. It can't be seen in that way, can it? We can't look at it like we look at a thought or looking at an object in the room that we're in. There's a kind of much more direct knowing that it's here. A seeing without eyes, seeing without using the senses. So again, just checking this out with me. What really am I? And it may be very, very different to what we've expected to experience. And that may take some getting used to, that we may not find what we thought. For me, I was very surprised that I didn't find a Helen being that I could say, this is where I am. I only found this kind of, it just seemed like a blank space the first time I noticed my real self. Each time we look like this, it's going to be clearer and it's going to be deeper. We're going to see more and more this formlessness will begin to reveal its secrets to us. It is us. And it's also not inert or just empty space. It's really pure intelligence that gives the mind its intelligence. All of our mind's intelligence is borrowed from this formlessness. It is the pure sentience. So just checking out with me one last time, if you want to. How are you recognizing this? And where are you looking from? It will feel like I'm looking from this body at this formlessness. There'll be a sense of that. But when we really begin to look at this, we'll see that it's not actually like that at all. We may have a sense that we don't know how we're seeing it. That's okay too. Our inquiry is the work is done by asking the questions, by trying to find the answer. Answers will come later or now. It's not so important that we get a definitive answer to our questions. Just challenging the assumptions that have held us stuck, this idea that I am a thing, I know what I am, and that I am dependent upon my body, that I will be gone when it's gone. What can harm this formlessness, this empty space of being? Can anything hurt it, diminish it, attack it? Can it be wounded? Can it suffer? And can it be divided? Is it really divided into lots of individual beings, although it will seem like that still? So just looking like this, it is going to begin to break down eons of illusion where we've believed ourselves to be something and someone moving through time and space. We have this permanent aspect of ourself that is clearer and clearer every time we look, that it doesn't have any edges, that it must be the same formlessness that is the essence of all beings. And we also have and can celebrate and enjoy the form aspect of us. We can enjoy our body, we can enjoy our thoughts, once we know that that's not all we are, and that when those are gone, we will be just as we are right here, right now, that we won't be diminished at all. maybe the opposite. Maybe our experience will be even more enhanced. So we're not rejecting any part of our experience in a deeply embodied awakening. We're respecting our permanent aspect, investigating it, getting to know it. We're also respecting our temporary, changing and becoming aspect, our body and mind. And that those two really are very complementary to each other when we recognize that we're looking from the formlessness at the body and mind, not the other way around as we first begin. We may have an assumption inside that we are looking at the space of being from our body, from our mind. So just checking this out one more time. What can you find when you look for yourself? Where are you? What are you? Are you a something and a someone? And there's nothing to lose in looking this way. You will also still have your sense of being someone to play with. That doesn't disappear just because you've recognized what is real about you. You're not going to lose anything in this seeing. So if you found a particular question that we went through challenging, that might be the one to stay with for a while, to take into your inquiry. Just to really want to see the answer to that question is enough. Am I appearing and disappearing? Can I come to an end as formlessness? Just to really sit with that. Whichever particular thing was most challenging for you, that's where your consciousness is ready to see deeper, to expand. And there's no end point with self-inquiry. Every time, even now when I look, there is an even deeper experience of myself, and that can go on forever. It's infinite. Self-inquiry is a very direct way of looking and seeing without our eyes and seeing that permanent nature. Just to become interested and curious in what you really are is enough. That is a powerful conviction that's going to come to fruition. Again, when the self, your infinite nature that you really are, wants to recognize itself, nothing can stop that. Thoughts can slow it down, but nothing can stop it. Nothing at all can get in your way, except the belief, perhaps, that there is something in the way. Okay. So I have a question here that I will read out. I'll also, if anybody would like to ask a question or ask about the inquiry or share something, feel free to raise your hand on Zoom. I'll read this one first. Hi, Helen. I find myself continually placing contemplations. Is it really true? When I experience unease about anything at all, I wake up every morning and begin vacuuming out my psyche. This morning it occurred to me that maybe the feeling of unending peace, expansion, and freedom that I seek through the contemplations may be keeping me in a cycle of seeking and finding unease and contemplating it away. If I am already unending peace, freedom, expansion, then who or what is locating and contemplating these specks of dust or uneasiness? I feel that maybe the preference for peace and expansion in the body or being perpetuates the appearance of uneasiness that needs to be contemplated away. I hope this makes sense. Any insights would be greatly appreciated. Love always. So if we're contemplating and asking a question, is it true that I'm not good enough? Or is it true that I need to find peace, for example? Whatever question that we're asking, then it depends why we're asking the question. Again, we can ask a question without any assumptions, but we have to be careful in the end that we are asking the question from the right place. So we ask these questions while we believe the thoughts, and they begin to undo our belief, our capacity to believe the thought. Once we've seen that the belief, isn't true, then we can drop the questioning and just remain noticing that space of our being that we were just checking in with. And what happens often is that our egoic sense of self, our mind, begins to use the contemplative practice as a way to sustain a sense of separateness. And we begin to look for peace, which is really an assertion that it isn't already here. Peace, freedom, as you've said. So if I'm looking for peace, in this example, coming from the starting assumption that it's not already here, then I'm going to feel disturbed. In that very assertion that peace isn't already here, I'm going to feel disturbed. And my contemplative efforts will be to try to get back to peace. Instead, if I'm asking, is it really true it's not here already? Do I really even need to find peace? Then it will take us back to that open space where there is quietness, where there is the silence of our being, where there is already stability and peace in that. So if you've noticed that your mind is doing this subtle thing, making an identity out of even contemplation, which is, I think, what you're pointing to here, then it's probably just going to be better to drop the questioning if you can, or to change the question to something like, what is here already, to an exploration. What am I? What is reality? What is here right now? Or what else can I experience about myself right now? Some question that's going to take you deeper into yourself rather than looking to get some experience in the future, stating that it's not here right now. Of course, we're not consciously stating peace isn't here right now, but we're asserting that energetically, looking for something. The very act of looking for something is stating that it's not already here. I would like to get to peace because it's not already here. And as the infinite self, when you are sure that something is absent from your experience, you can never actually feel it. It's got to be missing from your experience. And you're starting to notice that, right? So just to check out reality, what really is that? Do I really even need to get anywhere? What's here already? That deepening in that way. So I absolutely agree, perpetuates the sense of uneasiness. And just to maybe switch the question or drop all questioning if you can now, and just stay with the emptiness of being, or a very much more direct question, whichever works for you. They'll take you to the same place. Lovely. Okay, so if anyone would like to ask a question or to share their experience in inquiry or have a question about the inquiry, you're welcome to raise your hand. We'll see how many questions we get. Okay, Lindy, when you're ready. You're muted there, Lindy, still.
Sorry.
No worries.
Can you see me and hear me? I can't see myself anymore.
Yes, we can see you. Thanks.
Okay, this might be a bit difficult to get to. I think that the nub of my question is, no, my experience seems to be that the awareness that is noticing thoughts is still incredibly tied up with the thoughts. I've been spending quite a lot of time being aware of the awareness, but it's very, it just slips away, even if I think I might have done and think I might have got it. And then that takes me on to, looking at looking back at the past. And I know, again, I'm using terms that, that none of this may be true either, but the experience at the moment, just raw when I'm thinking about it, when you were talking, was the awareness has always been very attached to the thoughts. So when I was a little girl and doing things and whatever, the awareness seemed like part of the little girl, if you see what I mean. I mean, I can see that the awareness is probably different and didn't have the identity of the little girl. But when I look, which obviously isn't very direct yet, it just feels like it was a little girl looking. I find it very hard to find the bit that has been unchanging. It feels like the whole of me has been changing.
Yeah.
I have had the experience in the past, just for a few hours once, and it was just wonderful, where the thoughts were out here and there was more awareness here, foreground and background. And that's what sort of gives me the hope, the trust and the faith to continue, because if I've seen it once, I'm hoping that will sort of happen, I mean, I'm not just relying on, oh, I had an experience, it's all going to come back. I know it's an experience, but, it's given me that possibility of seeing things differently, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I don't really quite know what I'm saying. It's just I find it very difficult to believe I'm going to be here in some form when this body goes.
Yeah.
When I have that,
let's check it out now if you want to. Shall we have a look now and see?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's say a thought appeared right now, or the fact that you can hear these words. There's some awareness because you can hear these words, right? Just checking that awareness out. It's just looking at the awareness right now. We're not remembering the past or the future or anything. Just looking at the awareness that's hearing these words. Is it, well, what can you tell me about it when you look at it now? Is it changing? And when I ask you these questions, please don't worry if you can't give me the answer that you want to give, or, that if there's no answers you should or shouldn't give. If you can just sort of give me some feedback as you go, we can fine tune it.
It doesn't feel like such a gap. It seems probably split second that the awareness is of what is being said is referred back to the mind for a comment.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you suddenly. It's volume.
Okay.
There we go. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
That better?
Yeah, sorry, say that again for me.
Obviously, the awareness does get it, but it almost refers it straight back to the mind for a comment immediately. There's very little space between the actual hearing of it and then the thinking about what you've just asked me.
Okay, so let's look right there. So there's recognition that awareness is listening to these words, and there's just awareness. And then you said almost immediately mind comments about the awareness, yeah, or something like that. Some mind makes some comment on it. Okay. And does that change the awareness then? So awareness, when I ask you to look at the awareness is watching itself, and then mind speaks about the awareness, and the awareness goes to look at the mind, the thought. Okay, it listens to that thought then. But is the awareness changed in that? Is the awareness changed? Whether it's looking at itself, you can tell me, yes, there's awareness because I'm hearing these words. And then awareness of a thought. Awareness is then looking at a thought because mind has spoken. Let's just slow it down right there and check this out. And everyone can do this if they want to. Is the awareness any different, whether it's looking at a thought or whether it's looking at itself? And again, if you can't give me a direct answer, it's okay. It's enough to really freeze frame here and just slow down and look at this in a bit more detail here.
The answer is I don't know.
See, that is a good answer. That's an honest answer. And we can move forward from there. So the assumption that we've had before, all of us, is that it's better when awareness is looking at itself than when it's looking at a thought. And that somehow I need to get awareness to recognize and only look at itself and to never look at the mind. Can you see that kind of assumption inside somewhere? What if that's not true? And actually, all we need to do is recognize that the awareness is unchanging, whatever it's looking at. It can either look outwards at a thought, or it can turn around and look at itself. But is it changed in that? That's where it's really going to be worthwhile putting some attention and time over the next coming days for you if you feel a resonance with this. So if I can come to see that the awareness is the same, it's unblemished, whether it's looking at thoughts or whether it's looking at itself. And then I'm going to get this a deeper sense of the unchanging aspect of myself. It'll feel much more concrete. When awareness looks at itself, the body-mind has a nicer feeling experience, granted. When awareness looks at thoughts, the body-mind can feel contracted and maybe some negative emotion. But it's enough to know that the awareness is not changing in that. So it's okay that we don't know. And that's where we all start from, just to check that out inside your own self, just to want to see. Can you get a sense of it, that there's something important here?
I can, and I know I've had little glimpses of that, and this, that I have occasionally felt this, but I can't seem to do it at will, if you see what I mean. Sometimes I can see it, sometimes I can't. And today it seems like I very much can't.
That's okay. We are just drilling down into this illusion and finding where to put the most attention for the best results, let's say. So there's been this assumption that the problem is that awareness is going back to look at the mind. And maybe that's not the real issue. Maybe that's something that we can't do anything about that directly. Awareness may look at the mind, or it may listen to a sound outside, or it may look at itself. Maybe it's going to do that for a while, but maybe that's not the goal, to get it to look at itself 100% of the time. That may happen by itself later. Right now, it's enough for you to stay with this question. Is the awareness changing? Is it diminished? Or what's happening to it when it goes to look at mind? What it's looking at is changing. But what the awareness itself, is that changing? Is there any difference when awareness looks at a thought? And just to hold that question inside your consciousness a little bit each day is going to begin to burn away this assumption that you can't see it. As if the question is like the antidote or the medicine that's going to undo this assumption inside. In fact, the answers are almost irrelevant. The answers will come to this question, but the looking at self is burning away your ability to believe this assumption. If that feels important to you, if there's something going, yeah, there's something important here for me to look at. Maybe we've had the wrong challenge. We've been trying to do the wrong thing. And it was the same for me. I had this idea that I had to keep attention on the awareness all the time, awareness to look at itself all the time.
I'm not sort of trying to do it all the time, but when I'm meditating and I try to do the aware of awareness, the kind of things you've been talking about and what's come up today is incredibly elusive to me, yeah. I think. And then I start drilling down further, and then I come to the questions, which, you know, I think might be irrelevant. But until I became, you know, conscious child, I have no memory. Memory only starts, you know, to sort of toddler age or whatever. And I know in some ways that is irrelevant, but nevertheless, you know, that is sort of there. And those kind of thoughts, I think, possibly get in the way, because that's, a, you know, quite logical, and that's a logical, you know.
Yeah. And the reason there's no memory from those early days for us all is because awareness wasn't particularly fixating on anything. It was just looking at itself or looking at whatever came up, and there wasn't any assumptions really being held onto tightly. So that's really all we're doing in this conversation, is to look at the assumption that's causing the challenge here in the seeing. And that's just to question this idea that awareness is different. Because if I am the awareness, then I should feel the same unchanging self. I should feel the same, recognize this unchanging nature, whether I'm looking at myself or looking at a thought. I'm inherently the same. That's where we're going to come to from this kind of questioning. Yeah. What I'm looking at is going to change, but where I'm looking from is not changing. There's a stability that kind of comes with that recognition.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I think there are little, you know, there are times when I sort of have seen this, and it's not a huge question, but I think tonight, just because I so often come back to this place, it just was worth, you know, asking you about it, because this is where I usually end up. It sort of becomes a circle, even if I see it from a slightly different perspective sometimes.
Yeah.
This seems to be the default, very sort of like a heavy way of looking at it, you know, a perspective that's quite rigid.
Yeah. And that's the ultimate freedom of the awakened state, is that it doesn't matter what I'm looking at, whether I'm looking at myself or I'm looking at some phenomenon. I know inherently that I remain as I've always been, no matter whether, you know, what I'm looking at is going to change, coming and going and all of that. So just, you know, to stick with that question, is the awareness actually changing when it looks at something different? Just to really want to see that something's going to begin to open up in that. And not necessarily expecting a mental answer, but your body will begin to tell you that something's happening. There might be a sense of opening, a lightening as you stay with the question. And the answer may come in the form of a deeper peace inside, rather than any sort of aha moment. That it may happen that way also. But just as I question these assumptions, I'm going to find more peace anyway, because it's the assumption that's been disturbing me, this idea. Very good. It's always good to check these things out, isn't it? If our consciousness is getting stuck on this particular point, it's good to go round and round in a loop. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Okay. Would anyone else like to ask a question or to share something? Okay, Pat, when you're ready. Are you muted there, Pat? I think I could probably... Can we do it from here? I'm not sure if I can.
Is that
there
sound?
we go. Lovely. Yeah.
Sorry about
That's okay. It's absolutely fine.
Pieces, which is fine. You know, it's less weight to carry. A bit rude seeming to the world. Yes, what Lucy kind of reminded me, and it's very much with me this morning when I woke up, and it's been in and out and in dreams and various things as well. It's been around that various, they're not exactly memories, they're like alive pieces of something as a child, from being like a toddler to probably about 5, I'd say. It doesn't matter exactly when, really, but there's in that all that area, which is fairly vivid, is a lot of unchangingness, is a lot of just what's here now. And it doesn't seem at all odd that that's the case. I did wonder initially about if it was a kind of growing phenomenon of interest, because it was all of the scenes that I have, or not I have, that come to mind or would get dreamt about, seem to involve curiosities, something of deep, and a lot of it is on my own. And I come from quite a big family, so it must have been quite something to find spaces where I was on my own, but deeply, really curious about all kinds of things, and that in itself hasn't changed, the curiousness and the. So I don't really know what I'm saying, except that some aspects of it seem very linked. In that, at one stage, I think when I was about 10 or 11, I discovered something about a feeling, a sense of energy in my hands, that the closer they were together, the more vivid this thing was. And I went around making everybody do this and experiment. And I definitely had a feeling that I would be able to walk through a wall if I could just get the knack.
Yeah.
I didn't, actually try to do it by bumping into the wall, but that's never left me either. That matter and this, whatever this is, this living energy, energetic something, of course has all these possibilities. And so from a huge chunk of time where I felt I was kind of discovering something, and maybe I was, and yes, I was, definitely in a way, but mostly it hasn't really changed. It's not been about discovering exactly. It's just more about this feeling of it's always been here, as it were, and there's loads of stuff. We were in a cafe that was open till 3 in the morning. We could get anything, but and I don't know if I'm asking anything in particular, but it was very lovely to hear the way that Lucy was saying about her early feeling of things, and because it just prompted me to bring it out. And I've got a feeling that this kind of allowing a kind of is how it is, to be freer and not to be so
like waiting for it to tidy itself up into an intellectual volume that can be on the library. Something like that.
We do that for a while, don't we? We try to get a handle on it mentally, and it just doesn't, because it just is what it is, this, and after a while you stop trying to figure that out, right? And just like, it's just here. There's more of a noticing, actually this has been here, and I can remember it from being a young child, and I'm starting to see that it's not changed, no matter how much my body's changed, no matter how much my experience has changed, my thoughts have changed, everything else, but it's still the same as it was. Something in that's unchanging, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I don't want to be morbid at all, on the contrary, but at the other, it's not at the other end of that, but in kind of the experience, I happen to have had what turns out to be, and was at the time actually, very fortunate to be with a few very close people when they were dying, and actually quite, some of whom were quite conscious themselves. And there's no way to be with something like that can't open something out. It's just so, wouldn't make any kind of sense whatsoever if it, to sort of convince myself it was all closed down and they've gone somewhere and it's all fine. Not like that at all.
It can be a very different experience, actually, can't it? That clearer and clearer that there is some part of us that is continuous and is not at all dependent upon the body, although it can use the body, it can all of that, but
and even the joining with these other people in some way. That at first, when I came across this way of looking at things as it were, that's how it seemed. How can we all be the same part of one another? But I mean, it just becomes more and more absolutely, it's not just acceptable, it just seems that's how it is. It just feels,
it becomes more and more obvious. It has a more obviousness. What was hidden, seemingly difficult to perceive, just becomes clearer and more, oh yeah, it's just kind of always been that way as you look again and again.
And it's all good.
I'm
very, very, very convinced through a number of really quite dramatically what would be described as awful, horrible experiences that there was nothing that hasn't been a really, really deep, simple, clear gift to just show something. Just that. I mean, I don't have any particularly like big deal about any of that. It's just so, it's for you know, I really needed to come to this. I really needed this. So anyway, that's like an advert in the middle of the speaking. We do everything and everyone, as it were. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you for sharing that with us. It's nice to hear from you as well. And
very grateful to Lucy too. It just encouraged me to join in for a change.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good to talk to you. Okay, lovely. We've got time for one more. If anybody would like to share something or ask. Actually, I have one more question here I could go through as well. We'll do that quickly. Okay, let me find this. Okay, it says, hi Helen, I've been watching what you post and I had a question. Let me there we go. I had a question about a recent video Laurie asked in Cease Becoming Satsang. Are these seeming body minds that are showing up on this satsang listening to you because that is just what is happening? You replied, that is just spontaneously happening. What is spontaneously happening? And there is a sense of doing something and planning something while identified as the body-mind, but it is happening spontaneously. My question is, are all thoughts spontaneously happening in the mind as a reaction to sensations and other thoughts, like autopilot or a natural unfolding? Or does the big I or awareness have any influence on mind's thoughts? For example, am I watching a movie where I have very immersed and identified as a character, but have no control or influence over the story? Or maybe more like a virtual reality role-playing game where I select the character and will identify with and only see on the screen from the character's limited perspective, but I can influence some of the action in the scene. Are any of the thoughts in my perceived physical life fundamentally coming from or guided by the greater I? I guess that is like asking if the ocean has any control over its waves or cares about the waves. Separately, I'm still asking, how do I know I am aware, and saying, I don't know to push the door open, but no experiential change yet. Okay, so let's have a look. So are you watching this movie with no control over it? Is it just playing out? Or are you choosing the character on the movie screen and really having some influence on that? And the answer really is both. There's an aspect of us, we have an aspect of us that is seemingly separate. It's individual but not separate, in which there seems to be a decision-making process and some planning, but that also is contrasted against our permanent aspect that we've been looking at in this self-inquiry, that is just watching and not so much invested that in the same way as the character is. The character on the movie screen is very invested in its future and its outcome, and the one watching the movie is also you. You have both, you're appearing as both of these versions, in which you seemingly passively just watching, and then also as this character in the movie. Because where we struggle is when we're only seeing the character on the movie, we're unaware of the one watching, where we're really watching. So we're only going to struggle if we try to pick one of those. Am I the character in the movie, or am I the one watching? And it's really yes to both, that you are the one watching and you're also showing up as this character that's going through this life experience. And to extend your analogy, if I get it right, if I have recognized myself to be the watching, the awareness, and watching this movie of my life, then the access to the characters are going to become upgraded too. So the self, the recognition of the self, that I am the permanent nature, is not going to directly affect the characters, but it's going to allow more light to shine through the mind and body. And our sense of being someone, our individual character, is going to get an upgrade in that process. The ocean doesn't really care about the waves in that way, doesn't have any control over the waves in that way, as you've used in this analogy. But the deepest recognition is I can show up as the ocean or the wave, and that they're really the same thing. And that as the wave, I will seem to have some movement and change and becomingness and all of that. As the character on the movie screen, I'll seem to have decisions to make and things like that. So it's both. And the deepest place to really see yourself from is where those both have merged into one, that they're not actually two. They seem to be two. Am I watching, or am I doing? You know, am I a character in this, or am I just watching this whole thing play out? And it's both of those. You get to play with both of those, recognizing that when the movie ends, I'm still right here watching, and I'm watching a blank screen for a while, and then another body will appear, and around we go with the next movie. So does the ocean need to control the waves? Not at all. But the wave can be totally be itself in that recognition, can it? That nothing is trying to come from that. As to your last, how do I know I am aware? And saying I don't know to push the door open, but no experiential changes yet. Maybe we'll do a satsang on that. That's a good one to do a satsang on. We'll look at that one in the future. Okay, lovely. So thank you for your questions. We'll leave it there for this evening, and thank you. Namaste.